Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Mini Sky Tonight. So continuing on our solar system tour, we're going to discuss about Mars, especially since this week we have an amazing opportunity to check out Perseverance and Ingenuity being able to land on Mars. A couple of other countries have landed and put orbiters into orbit around Mars this past few days. And so now we can check out what's cool about Mars and why we're exploring it. So let's talk about some of the basic information. So Mars has been known throughout the centuries. In fact, the first recorded observations were in Egypt around about 1534 BC. But to us, we name it after the Roman god of war. But in Greek, it was named Ares. In Sumerian, it was called Nergal. In China, it was considered the fire star, and a couple of other different names from different cultures. The first person to actually see it, though, through a telescope was Galileo himself. Now, many people think that, oh, Galileo was the first person to create the telescope. That's actually not true. He was the first person to take the telescope and point it up to the sky. It was Hans Lippershey who basically created the first telescope, but he called it a spyglass because he used it to look towards the horizons for ships. Galileo read account of this device and created his own to be able to look up at the stars. And he was able to look at Mars. Since back in the time, the term planet meant wanderer because they thought, oh, there's stars that wandered among the other stars in the sky, when in actuality they were something different. And as Galileo was able to point his telescope up into the stars, he was able to see that these quote unquote wanderers were a whole lot more than just wandering stars. In fact, it was from his example of looking at the sky that inspired a bunch of other astronomers to do the same. And Huygens was able to look up at Mars, Schiaparelli and Lowell, and many, 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 many more. But I mentioned Huygens, Schiaparelli, and Lowell because they did some unique contributions to understanding what Mars is. Huygens was the one to basically first discover some of the unique features on the surface of Mars and notice it had some dark patterns and stuff because he had a bigger and better telescope. Schiaparelli was the first one to be able to quote unquote map Mars. He noticed what these were called chanels, meaning grooves or cracks or lines in the surface of Mars, and so he created a map. But of course, due to miscommunication and mispronunciation, it was thought canals, so hence the idea, oh, there's people on Mars. So hence the huge idea of Martians coming to visit us. So that's where the idea of beings from Mars would come down to do Mars attacks and everything of that nature. It all started from just a misinterpretation. So kids, it's important to use your words carefully and to understand what you say, because if you say the wrong thing or it gets misinterpreted, it could spark a whole different fireball of problems. So in this case, with chanels or grooves or lines, in this case, not actual canals, like there's living beings on the planet. And Lowell, as he was studying the planet, he noticed that it did have ice caps as well as it had 2 moons. And we'll get into the details of those particular moons here in a bit. So basic information. Since Mars is the 4th planet from the sun, it takes roughly about 687 days to go around the sun once, or to revolve around the sun once. That means it's a little close to double a year here on Earth. So it takes a long time for Mars to get around the sun. In fact, when we send people over to Mars, we're not going to use the term years in Martian terms. We're going to consider it in terms of sols, meaning like how long it takes to go around the orbit once. So 1 sol would be 1 year on Mars, because then we can not have to worry about miscommunication due to, yeah, it could be a year on Earth, but they haven't completed a year on Mars, and they say, oh yeah, we completed a year on Mars, but technically not, the year's already gone and went. So hence why they're going to use those different terms. And the great thing about Mars, though, is it has close to a 24-hour day, just a little longer. So basically an extra 30 minutes or so. So that's why many people are interested in Mars, is because even though it's half the size of Earth, it has an atmosphere, it has water, it has unique features that are similar to Earth. It has indications that it could have been Earth-like once upon a time. And it also has a day that's similar to Earth. So adjusting to this planet would be a whole lot easier. So that's why we're interested in sending people to Mars. Now, it's 1.5 astronomical units away, which means 141 million miles away from the sun. So it's quite a long distance. In fact, if you're curious of why we use astronomical units and everything, I'll leave a link in the description up above here to discuss about how I talked about cosmic rulers. Now, the temperature on Mars is unique. Unlike Earth, where the highest it can get is over 100 degrees and the lowest it can get is down into the negative 30s or 40s in some places, the hottest it ever gets on Mars, like this is like Sahara Desert in the summertime temperatures. The hottest it'll ever get is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, period. The coldest, however, it gets near the poles is incredibly cold. It's negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It is frigid on this planet. So in fact, the average temperature on Mars is close to around about 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit daily. So it'll be cold on Mars. So if you are a type of person that loves the cold, I know I don't. I enjoy being in nice 70-degree weather. I love spring and I love fall because it's just right. It's not too hot, not too cold. But if you love the cold, like you enjoy going camping in the middle of winter, this is the planet for you. As I mentioned, it is half the size of Earth. So it's like comparing basically to, I'm trying to think of a baseball to a basketball, kind of, give or take. One is about half the size of the other. But even though it's half the size of the planet, it still holds a decent sized atmosphere, not too thick like what we have, but a thin atmosphere nonetheless. It's affectionately known as the red planet because it kind of has this deep orange-red color. And as I mentioned, it has two moons, Phobos and Deimos, meaning fear and death. And the reason being why they gave them those names is because with the god of war, you get fear and death. They were in mythology, basically the two little, if you've seen the Disney movie Hercules, they're basically the little things that follow along with Hades in the movie. Even though they call themselves Pain and Panic, in Roman mythology, it was always fear and death. But they are indeed captured asteroids. That's why they were difficult to discover. It was Percival Lowell who finally did discover it on Mars Hill in Arizona. So let's dive a little deeper into the atmosphere and take a look at the surface in some of the geology of this unique planet. So why is it a red planet? So why, compared to Earth, which has this beautiful, luscious brown soil, it's kind of like this deep red-orange color? Well, it has to deal with the type of materials that are in the soil. Mostly silicon and iron are in the soil. Like at least a good 80% of the material in the soil is iron. And well, kind of like when you take a nail and stick it out in the yard and leave it out there for a long time, and then say about a half a year later, you go out and go find it again, you'll notice it has rust spots on it. Well, that's what's going on Mars. The water interacts with the iron in the soil and with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere as well as water mixing together, you get oxidation or rust. So Mars is a cold, rusty planet. And yes, we have discovered water. We have seen mudslides. We have seen ice build up into craters that indicate water, but it's very little bit of water, but still water. We believe that there's some water underneath the surface as well that's frozen because of the cold temperatures. Now, as you look at this map right here, and I picked out this map because I thought it was a really cool map to kind of show you some of the high points and low points of Mars. If you look at the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, you'll notice drastic differences in the two hemispheres. The southern hemisphere has a bunch of highlands, has a bunch of mountain ranges, has the volcanoes and everything, and it has a ton of unique features, and it's also heavily cratered. Whereas in the northern hemisphere, on the other hand, is smooth. It's some of the lowlands and doesn't have a lot of unique features. In fact, many of the features that it does have came long after Mars cooled down. Astronomers believe that this used to be kind of like a lava field, and then as the lava cooled, this is where some of the water that was once on Mars pooled. So like this used to be like the Grand Atlantic Ocean on Mars, up near the northern hemisphere. Astronomers are hoping to kind of discover with some new features from other missions to find out like what the history is of this planet. But who knows, maybe we'll discover a unique circumstance to where maybe early forms of life started to form on Mars, but because the sun settled down and the habitable zone shifted, Mars is no longer habitable. It has two polar ice caps, similar to that of Earth. It's kind of like we have the North Pole and the South Pole. It has two polar caps as well, but the ice on there is mostly carbon dioxide ice and a little bit of water. So think dry ice. You know, that kind of weird, funky ice that if you touch it, you can accidentally get burned or makes all this smoke and fizz everything. That's what it is. And of course, as I mentioned, it has tons of craters, highlands, dried lakes, rivers, so much more. It hosts a wide variety of different geological features that indicate a unique past. And we're slowly discovering that past as we unveil some more of the planet. So here's a beautiful map just to kind of show you the southern hemisphere versus the northern hemisphere. So as you can see in the northern hemisphere, it's relatively smooth compared to the southern hemisphere, which has tons of craters, has a bunch of dark features and lots of highlands and everything that you kind of can see, some ridges and everything. So as you look here on the map, though, you can see a few different unique features that definitely point out. And I want to discuss those unique features. One of them lies right here, this big, huge blob spot. And then there's this long crack right here. These are the two features I want to show you. Even though Mars is half the size of Earth, it holds the grandest of grands in the solar system. The first grandest of the grands is Olympus Mons. It is a huge shield volcano. Just to give you how big this shield volcano is, now, many people, when they hear the term shield volcano, they think of like the volcanoes in Hawaii. Those are a little different. Many of the volcanoes in Hawaii are stratospheric volcanoes, meaning like the epic volcanoes where you have a big, huge hole at the top and it looks like a kind of big, huge mountain peak and you get the spray and everything. Those are what are known as stratospheric volcanoes. Dome volcanoes or shield volcanoes, however, are completely different. The lava is a little more viscous, so you can't get the eruption epic like it does in the stratospheric. Usually the stratospheric ones, the reason being why you get that epic blowout is because it's a lot of pressure and steam that's built up and it's basically acting like a teapot and going. Well, on Mars, since much of the water is kind of frozen, it's taken a long time for it to heat up and it doesn't have as much internal heating as it does here on Earth. So it's kind of viscous. So it's very thick, it's gooey. And so what happens is it basically goes up and then it goes and it just layers out. It just basically keeps pooling on top of itself in this big, huge dome. So it's not necessarily like a big, huge, tall mountain peak. It's this big, huge mountain that's basically a big, big, big hill. Now, it's not active, it's extinct. The volcanism on Mars has cooled off, so it cannot keep doing any more volcanoes, but it's the tallest volcano in the solar system. Even though it's not like the epic peak, it is still taller than Mount Everest. In fact, it's 3 times taller than Mount Everest. The tallest mountain are on our planet, and Olympus Mons is still bigger. In fact, here's a size comparison. So you have Mauna Kea, which is in Hawaii, which is some of the tallest mountains in Hawaii. And then you have Mount Everest, which is the tallest mountain on the earth. And then you have Olympus Mons. So as you can see with Mauna Kea and Mount Everest, it kind of has those nice little peaks. Olympus Mons is this flat dome, but it's still so much bigger. It dwarfs Mount Everest. All right, next feature, Valles Marineris, or Mariner Valley, as it's sometimes called. It is the largest canyon in the solar system. It is the grandest of Grand Canyons. It literally looks at our Grand Canyon and says, "Aw, how cute, you try." And here's why. It is a unique type of canyon. Unlike the Grand Canyon, which was formed due to the river going through it, this was formed due to the Mars crust cooling and possibly plate tectonics. So it's two siding plates that shifted. Kind of like what's going on in California right now, is where two plates are rubbing together. But we have seen evidence of water flow, like in the little channels that are extending off of the canyon itself. So it can form a little bit from water, but those, as you see how tiny those are compared to how big this thing is, it's mostly due to plate tectonics and cooling. Let me give you a size comparison. What I mean by grandest of Grand Canyons. The depth of Valles Marineris is 8 kilometers. It is incredibly deep. It's basically as deep, almost as deep as Mount Everest is high. And it is so long that it stretches from New York to Los Angeles. And it's so wide that it can fit the city of San Antonio inside its basin. It is huge. Even our Grand Canyon can't keep up with that, as you can see. And just to give you a size comparison, yeah, the Grand Canyon is about a mile, is about 18 miles wide. Valles Marineris is 150 miles wide. It is crazy. So like I said, this is the grandest of Grand Canyons in our solar system. So now that we looked at the surface and the geology, let's dive even deeper into the planet to learn what's going on underneath the surface. It doesn't have as many layers because it's only half the size of Earth, so it wasn't able to do a lot of differentiation, but it does have a few layers. It has a very, very, very thin crust and the mantle, and then a core, but not differentiation as much as it does here on Earth. We don't detect a magnetic field like what we have here on Earth, but we notice that the crust is slightly magnetized. So could it be that the iron in the soil and underneath the surface is basically picking up some magnetization that's leftover residue magnetization from when Mars was active? We don't know. We're hoping to find out more coming up with different missions. I know one of the missions that's looking into this is called MAVEN, which looks at the magnetic fields of Mars. And we notice that there is still some tectonic activity that's going on. One of the missions that has landed on Mars is called InSight, and it detected over 450 Marsquakes. So like how we have earthquakes here on Earth, they call them Marsquakes there. Now, the atmosphere on Mars is incredibly thin because since it's only half the size of Earth, it doesn't have enough gravity to retain a lot of the lighter elements like what we have here on Earth. And much of the sun has stripped a lot of the lighter elements away because it can't contain it. So it mostly has carbon dioxide, but traces of other gases as well, like methane and other different heavier gases. But it does go through different seasons, since it does have a little bit of a tilt in its axis. And as it rotates for the 24 hours, it does go through different seasons. Not seasons like what we see here on Earth, but all of a sudden you can get huge storms that envelop the entire planet, given the different temperature gradients. Like huge storms, like literally storms that cover the entire planet. So as you can see in this image, on June 26th, you can see all the different surface features, but on September 4th, storms covered most of the planet. Now, they're not like the storms like what you see in The Martian or anything of that nature. There are winds, but they're not dramatic. That's Hollywood doing what Hollywood does best. But they have detected dust devils and a few other different things. But one of the unique things that they have discovered on Mars that made them curious to study the magnetic field a little more is that they have detected aurora. Now, aurora, in order to be able to get aurora or the northern lights and southern lights, is you have to have a magnetic field. What happens is that charged particles from the sun go through space and they can interact with planets. And when those charged particles hit a magnetic field, they flow up the magnetic field line because charged particles love magnetic field lines. They're attracted to them. So all these charged particles, as soon as they detect a magnetic field, they flow into the magnetic field lines and go to the poles. That's why we get the northern and southern lights here on Earth. The sun's charged particles hit our magnetic field, and those charged particles go to the northern and southern parts of our planet. So hence why you can't see northern or southern lights in the middle of the Earth as well, unless you have like a huge storm that sends all those charged particles around the globe. Most of the time, it's usually at the northern and southern parts of our planet. But we have detected aurora on Mars. We have seen the color displays in the northern and southern parts of Mars. So could there be a magnetic field that is just incredibly weak, but we're able to detect it? Or could this be artifacts of magnetization in the soil? We're hoping to discover more. Now, oh boy, we have visited this planet a lot. And I mean a lot. That we have, since the Mariner ages, we have basically done flyby missions to take a look at this unique planet. And Mariner 9 was the first orbiter to map Mars. And you have the Mars missions, which is the first lander on Mars. You have the 180-degree images. You have the Viking landers. You have all of these different surveyors. Many countries, many organizations have been interested in this planet. In fact, just this past week, we had United Arab Nations. We have also had the Chinese nation send probes to this planet. So a lot of things have gone to this planet. But however, here's the thing. Mars is sometimes known as the cursed planet because we have sent over 50 missions to Mars. But as you notice on my list, there was just so few I listed. I only listed the successes. Over 50 missions have gone to Mars, but many of them were failures. In fact, over half of the missions that have been sent to Mars have been failures of some kind. So Mars is sometimes called a cursed planet because some of the things have failed while we've been sending stuff to Mars. So here's hope that perseverance and ingenuity be able to land on Mars successfully. And of course, since it's another terrestrial planet and it's not as extreme as Venus, we're able to send rovers to take a look at them. We've been able to send Sojourner, we're able to send Spirit, Opportunity, ExoMars, Curiosity, and now Perseverance and Ingenuity, which is hoping to land in a few days. And then you have the next two that's in the works right now. They're hoping to send these two off sometime later this year or next year, is the Rosalind Franklin rover and the Mars Sample Return. Basically, it's a unique type of rover that's going to take samples and be able to return them back up into some type of space crash, which then could head back to Earth. It's in the works, but we'll keep an eye out for it. And of course, there's a ton of future missions available. ExoMars 2022, hoping to keep on track. I know with COVID, a lot of things have been put off a lot, but they're hoping that it can still stay on track. Japan is hoping to do the terahertz microsatellite, which basically is going to take a much closer look at the magnetic field. You have the Mars Orbiter Mission 2, you have the Mars Moons exploration. This will be the kind of like the first mission that's going to focus specifically on the moons and understand the history behind those moons and how it got captured, and much, 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 much more. And we're hoping sometime in the year, say 2030, hopefully we'll be able to send people to another celestial body. The first time we've sent people to a celestial body was the moon. And yes, we did land on the moon. But now we're hoping to send people to the planet Mars. So where can you see it? This is such a unique planet and such a unique opportunity. You want to check it out for yourself. Well, fortunately, right now, Mars is high enough in the sky that it can be seen throughout most of the night. So all you have to do is quite literally head outside and look close to straight up. And right next to the constellations Orion and Taurus, you should see the planet Mars. It kind of looks like this faint red star. So in fact, I find as I kind of can see right here, you can see the star of Betelgeuse and Aldebaran and then Mars. So it looks like these three stars that kind of make a row. So if you want to go check them out this week, I would highly recommend it. And if you have a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, you can definitely see kind of like this orange disc in the sky. So that's all about the planet Mars. And in fact, I highly recommend that you tune in to watch the landing of Perseverance on Mars to check out some of that mission. If you have any questions or comments, leave it down in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for me for topics you would love for me to cover over, leave it down in the comments as well. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, never stop learning.